Everyone, and welcome back to Into the Metaverse for episode 2 of season 2. We've got a great conversation today. We're going to dive on all things crypto gaming and blockchain powered metaverse with the CEO of Polygon Studios, Wyatt. Ryan, great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Before we kick off, we have a quick announcement to make.
This podcast is brought to you by Roundhill Investments, the advisor to the Roundhill Ball Metaverse ETF. The Roundhill Ball Metaverse ETF, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol METV, is the largest dedicated metaverse fund in the United States. The ETF tracks an index developed by Ball Metaverse Research Partners, a metaverse-focused indexing and research company headed by industry expert Mathew Ball. For a prospectus and more information, please visit roundhillinvestments.com/ETF/METV. Read carefully. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. Distributor Foreside Fund Services, LLC.
So Ryan, getting right into it, we have a tradition on the podcast. We have the same first questions, each guest that joined us on board, and it's really been a powerful way to kind of establish the beginning of a consensus of just what it is that we're all talking about when we are using the term metaverse. So in your view, as CEO of Polygon Studios, but also you've been in the gaming world for such a long time, and there's so many similarities between metaverse and gaming and virtual worlds. And so in your view, and everyone at Polygon, what in your view is the metaverse? And as we like to say on the podcast also, what it is not in your view?
Yeah, I actually think it's honestly a fantastic question to start off because it certainly, I think, means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think the way that I have spent time over it, I think I've come to terms with very much simplifying a movement of people spending more time in, let's just say, digital worlds that are connected in some way, shape, or form, right? There's been this natural evolution of people spending time on devices more and more. The things that they're doing within those devices become much more enriching experiences. When mobile phones launched, and apps even for that matter, think about how rudimentary a lot of those experiences were and how we've continued to see the evolution of that. And now you start to take it into these virtual 3D worlds and you start spending a lot of time in these digital environments. And with that comes its own, slew of opportunity, different ways users want to interact, the way people value that and their time perceived in that environment start to come into play. So I think this is kind of, where we're going. And I actually see the world of video games kind of colliding and blurring, right? You have 3 billion gamers in the world. Not all of them are self-identified gamer as well. Gamers, they're just, they're playing games and it's part of their experience. Look, I think this is starting to see some of these, the way that we interpret video games as well, starting to be much more broad. And so I also think on top of the metaverse with this digital world concept is you're starting to see the lines actually blur, right? It's clearly not just video games, right? But you're starting to see these elements come into play. It's very interesting to see, at the end of the day, I think it's just a convergence of a lot of different technologies that are occurring.
I think something you hit on is really prescient. And this, I always harken back to what Yon told me when we first chatted. He formed Super Social in January of 2020, I believe, right? A couple of years ago, because, he saw this metaverse movement, as kind of the next form of human digital expression. And so I think you really hit on that. We are socializing, engaging with people in a new, profound way, where in platforms that connect digital and physical worlds together. And so I think you hit that right on the head. And I think it aligns really deeply with what we've been talking about. I think there's, I still see people today talking about the metaverse is just rebranded virtual reality. And Yon and I are extremely passionate about the fact that that's just not the case. The metaverse is not a device, and it's exactly what you were getting at. It's this next form of socialization inside of digital worlds.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, the really thing that's, people, when you hear people one of the typical cliche responses back is I want to spend time with people in real life, right? And it's cool, I think that's definitely a really important part of social behaviors. But what the internet was able to do is really globalize and break down these walls, that we were able to know people beyond just our neighborhoods, beyond our schools, beyond our cities, and really have access to people all around the world. And we started to do a lot of great things with that, build companies, do virtual video calls, right? And so if you think, engage in video games together and play together, right? And so it started to unlock a lot of these social experiences in digital ways to begin with. And so in the most simplified way, you're really just expanding upon that now in digital environments too. And the depth and complexity of what you can do now is much higher as technology and innovation has occurred. Look at what, some of the stuff with even Unreal sidebar. But anyway, I mean, it's just pretty incredible. And so I'm very excited for the ability to kind of continue to expand upon that from a social perspective. I think it's fascinating.
So after kind of kicking off on this kind of wider definition of the metaverse, Ryan, one of the things in season 2 we want to add is kind of the question which more relates to dealing with a lot of the confusion that is happening at the moment between metaverse, Web3 conversations. Some people define the metaverse as Web3. People talk about Web3. Well, that's the metaverse. And so we were hoping in this conversation with you, because of the background coming into this world as a gamer, but also, as your role as CEO in Polygon, Studios, how do you believe that what is sort of the role that crypto and other related technologies collectively referred at the moment as Web3? What is the role and sort of the factor that these technologies play in the emergence of the metaverse, in enabling a metaverse?
I think obviously they're two very different things. In my interpretation, what Web3 is and what the metaverse is. And I think there are things that you can do as far as my interpretation of metaverse that doesn't necessarily need to be on chain. The reason why I like Web3 and why I think Web3 and metaverse is, from a concept are very highly complementary to one another, is you really start to see if you spend more time and you're spending more time in these digital worlds, then you start to just put more value in all aspects of it. You're like, I'm spending a lot of my time in here. I'm starting now, therefore, to spend more of my money in here, and you're starting to invest in it. And so all of a sudden, I do think things like digital ownership really become very material and meaningful. And that is stuff that you can truly only embrace the integrity of it if it is on chain. I also think the spirit of Web3 is this democratization of development. It is a community and user-led first initiative. And so the overall spirit of it very much embraces this idea of you want those core values in a digital world. You want those core values in a non-digital world of being able to have those kind of freedoms. And so it seems like some of those core principles you want to make sure are not maintained by a couple big tech companies, centralized servers, things of that nature. And so I do think although I look at them as uniquely different, I think they're just so highly complementary of each other, and that the biggest experiences within the metaverse, I have full conviction will have to be on-chain experiences for that reason.
One of the things that we discussed in season 1, we had this wonderful podcast episode with Rev, the VP of Simulation and Omniverse at NVIDIA, and we talked about the sort of the deterministic approach of, in order for the metaverse to be a metaverse, it has to be an open metaverse. And I think we have a point of view where blockchain and crypto and these kind of adjacent technologies are really about enabling not only the financialization of the internet and that the sense of ownership, Ryan, that you've described, but also, and perhaps more importantly, is a word that it also has been completely misunderstood for a lot of good reasons. Some people, I initially even struggled to pronounce it properly. I hope I'm doing a good job now, which is interoperability. And interoperability is really important and in really enabling a virtual space and a virtual sphere where people can move around with the assets that they own, right?
Yeah.
And so that's another concept that I'm really curious about, with Polygon being a layer 2. And we're going to deep in a second and kind of unpacking a bit more for our audience what is Polygon. With Polygon being a layer 2 on top of Ethereum, how do you guys think about interoperability and enabling interoperability for creators and developers that are building on your infrastructure.
Yeah, so if you think about, let's talk about, like, particularly you touched on interoperability of digital assets, which is actually really from a technology standpoint, very difficult. So even taking a step back, when we think about Polygon, right, in the spirit of what we're trying to do, not covering the L2 stuff, we'll save that for kind of the next question up. But the spirit of what Polygon wants to do outside of our tech stack is be able to add a lot of value to our developers, right? So at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of different chains that you can build on that, for all intents and purposes, are going to accomplish a lot of the core things that developers are going to need, right? Low to zero carbon footprint, low transaction cost, high transactions per second, right? And so when you start to think about what's really going to delineate these platforms from each other, it's going to be having a world-class developer relationship team, right? Like, who are you going to work with to onboard onto Polygon? Who's going to ensure your success? And what does that look like? And so I think it's very multifaceted, right? It's as much as, going to market, helping audit smart contracts. And the reason I bring all of this up is I think interoperability is actually going to be a huge BD opportunity and challenge and hurdle. And the reason I say BD is I have this idea, like, imagine if you come in and you're let's just say, Gucci wants to do, they have a handbag NFT and they're trying to think about utility into it. And they're looking outside the basic stuff of, you can come to, this Gucci event or even a discount off Gucci because you own this NFT, yada, yada. I start to think of, like, really cool partnerships that you can do with interoperability around, let's say for this conversation, it's a Gucci jacket NFT that you minted from Gucci. And it's like, okay, now you want to start to see really strong brand partnerships established across the ecosystem. So what I would love to do is then go into, taking that and be like, okay, we'll establish partnerships across the top 10 games. And we have games like, Zed Run and Crypto Unicorns and a lot of other ones that are on the way that you could go out and do these partnerships with. And because you own that underlying, Gucci jacket NFT, you could actually start to have that version inside of each one of these different games. And so you can't just cleanly, because of the way, how engines operate, how people build shaders, there's so many elements, you can't just take this asset from one game to one, like another virtual world or another game, whatever terminology you want to use to describe the digital worlds. It's just that's not feasible. It's not going to happen. So having something that's already on chain, that's that underlying NFT, and then doing some of these partnerships and having that be activated and increased utility inside of that original NFT by having more games is really cool. So anyway, it's a very long-winded, and we can unpack that because there's a lot to unpack there. I went through the idea quickly, but is it true, genuine interoperability? You could probably poke holes in it, but this is where I get excited when I'm Gucci and how do I figure out how to get into space, right? Like, well, all of a sudden now I've done this thing that I can tap to my core consumers. I've added utility over here that's really interesting, and now I'm starting to think NFTs for consumers in a whole different way, and now you really are tapping into, like, a metaverse strategy. So I threw a lot at you, probably even more than what you just asked, but I get excited about this topic because I think this one is, people talk about it a lot, but nobody wants to talk about how we really start to get it done in a current state.
I love that answer, and it harkens me back to when we chatted with Kathy Hackle way early in our season 1. And she was kind of saying that every company is going to probably need someone now already, whether it's a chief metaverse officer in title or someone who's a metaverse evangelist inside their organization. Every brand, every consumer company needs to have a metaverse strategy and needs to be thinking about bringing their IP into these virtual worlds, exactly as kind of you're saying. Just winding.
That, though, Matthew, like, I think the thing that'll be really interesting is a lot of people will do that. But who is really going to empower those folks? Because when you really think about what you could do, you could name anyone, like rattle any of these big, fashion, apparel, entertainment brands that have, a big brand value. Are you going to listen to that person that's going to have to wrangle a lot of different groups together to execute projects and add true, genuine utility and be able to put compelling roadmaps together about why you value that? And so it'll be interesting to see who does it as like a facade and who actually does it because they genuinely are going to try to pivot what their strategy is over the next decade. And there's a huge difference, and we'll see both.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember we saw like Coca-Cola minted NFTs and like, okay, cool. But like we've seen Nike be really aggressive. You know,
Yes.
they built a persistent Roblox experience. They acquired Artifact, which I learned how to pronounce after they already
By the way,
acquired it.
you're not alone there. If it makes you feel any better, I was a huge fan of one of their graphic designers forever before he even launched the company, and then even afterwards, and I said it wrong forever too. So you're in good company, man. I can admit that as well.
One thing I want to highlight, Matthew, before you jump into the next question, because I think everyone are going to be so curious to the unpack of Polygon a bit more. But the one thing that I think also, Ryan, to your point about interoperability and really understanding how do you build the metaverse strategies, I think we're moving from a world, rapidly moving from a world where NFTs are a static asset, where it's just you purchase NFT and that's it. And I think we're moving from that to something that is much more dynamic, something that I think of as almost like a living organism. It's an infinite possibilities of evolving and developing the NFT as an IP. And the beauty is because of the ownership and allowing people who own the NFTs a commercial right to the NFT, it's not just the company or the developer that can continue and develop the IP. It's also grassroots by definition because of the underlying NFT technology. And I think that is really profound as well. And I think that's another big thing that people don't really grasp at the moment, because we've been born and grown to a world of dominated, centralized IP creation. And this is going to radically transform the way IP is built, grown, and providing monetization opportunities to many, many, many creators who are passionate about the NFTs, but don't only collect them anymore, they can build on top of them.
100%, you know, and in fairness, I have so much empathy on this, because the amount of rewiring I've had to do. I've been, you know, I've been in angel investing in Web3, you know, companies for a while, but until I really came over to even Polygon and really took on this role, just really had to start rewiring the way that you think about things from a creative aspect and where they can start going. And I think that's why so many people are enthralled and engaged and wanting to jump over, because you hit this aha moment on some of these things, like exactly what you're talking about, where some of these things certainly have not been done, but now you realize the technical feasibility and opportunity to do it, and you become a kid in the, you know, a candy store, because now you're starting to think, okay, how do I tie X, Y, and Z together to do exactly what you're just talking about? Because I know it's actually realistic from a product, you know, capability standpoint, and it becomes very fascinating. And you honestly, you start to sound a little crazy when you start coming up with ideas around it. The Gucci jacket example for that same exact reason. But I agree. I think it's really fascinating, and people will start to realize that, right? And I actually think there are projects, you know, Bored Apes doing great. Like, started as this profile picture NFT, which is just a fucking JPEG at the end of the day. And now it's got all this utility. It's got this community. You know, they launch a token. They're thinking about a game, which is really just adding more utility to the underlying NFT. So I think it's amazing. Honestly, I'm so stoked to be in this space, you know, coming from big tech and coming into this. And I had honestly one of my, you know, dream job of what I did before. And I just, like, every meeting and every conversation is so fascinating in this space.
And if you want more insight on the Bored Ape Yacht Club plans for building an NFT-based metaverse and gaming platform, we talked about it on our last episode, so feel free to check that out.
I didn't mean to plug you. There you go. It's a natural plug. You make sure to loop back after this one.
I'm trying to get the marketing game down as good as I can as we go.
Got it. I love it.
So shifting gears a little bit, I just kind of wind back a little bit, because I think we might have people listening to this podcast who aren't part of the crypto native group, who are trying to understand what's going on. You know, maybe if you could just take a second to kind of give a short overview of kind of what Polygon is as a layer 2 platform, kind of how it's different from some of the other, you know, solutions out there, whether that's like solutions built on different blockchains like Solana, but then kind of the advantages that you see for Polygon. And then I think one other question, and it ties back to interoperability, is, you know, I kind of get the sense that we're at this early stage in crypto blockchain technologies where we have these differentiated, you know, blockchains. It reminds me of wireless technology. I used to be an analyst in you know, the wireless networking space. You know, we had GSM and CDMA, you know, technologies that were non-compatible. And it really, until we got to LTE, you couldn't take your Verizon phone to Europe. And so, you know, kind of how you think about how do we actually bring these together in the end to, you know, forge that interoperability.
I love the data cell phone example. It's a great one, actually. So the best way to kind of simplify it for those that are not crypto native is Polygon is an L2, which basically is on top of Ethereum as a platform. And what Ethereum has is certainly a massive user base and security. And what it is not able to do right now is appropriately scale. And so when you do more transactions on it, it comes with a high gas fee. And that's problematic if you're trying to launch things with, lower price points, lower item costs. So if you're into NFTs and you're purchasing really large purchasing of NFTs, you're okay with paying a pretty sizable gas fee, for doing that transaction. And Polygon obviously breaks that down. You basically are able to package a lot of transactions and at scale reduce transaction costs, reducing gas fees, and allow for low transaction costs to actually be feasible. So if you're running a game and you are charging an item for $29, you want a very low transaction fee. And so this is really the spirit of what Polygon was able to do. And if you think about what we strive to do in the ecosystem is to be the transaction layer at Polygon, and basically Ethereum is the settlement layer, and that's where everything ends up being stored on chain. And so that's the tech side of it. And you ask, a lot of what all of us will have to prove in due time, whether it's Solana or it's us, is how many transactions per second, can we actually meaningfully handle at scale, which it's still in its infancy. And so no one's actually had to prove how many transactions per second they can do at scale, not have any infrastructure stability issues, and then continue to figure out how to scale at large. And so these are some of the things that we're collectively working on as an industry. And so I think outside of the tech stack offering, you really start to make decision makings, and I alluded to this earlier. You really have to start making decisions on how are you going to see the partnership long term? Game development in particular is a very long process, especially for high fidelity games. A lot of the games that you see right now that are on-chain games are, financialization first games. Like, they're great games, but they're really not made for a large gaming population. And so you're going to see high fidelity games come on, and they're going to need help with things like token balance. Like, how do you make a really great game, which is already difficult in its own right, and then add a marketplace and economy aside it? You've seen games try to do this before, Diablo 3 with their auction house, and it actually completely wipes out what is otherwise a great game because there isn't a balance between these two. And so I think a lot of what we're putting, the value and equity of Polygon well beyond just its tech offering is going to be who can adequately support the developer ecosystem at scale. Much like what AWS is able to do, much like what Google Play does with all the apps in their store. And so I think that's a big focus of what we're going to spend our time on the studio side, which is basically, DevRel and BD and onboarding these partners and helping work with them and finding long-term success on Polygon, which is why we're totally focused on hiring from the gaming industry and bringing people with that background in mind, because even the ones that are non-gaming are going to need a lot of time understanding the digital world, which gaming knows very well.
Absolutely, and I do think that the analogies of sort of developer ecosystem, as someone who at Super Social we started building on the Roblox platform, it is absolutely imperative that for anyone who wants to serve creators and especially people who build expansive game worlds, you have to build an ecosystem of services around it to support, let alone when you're talking about a whole new technical frontier. So great overview, Ryan. I'm sure it's super helpful for the audience. And so switching gears to talk a bit about the stage of Polygon overall as an organization. You guys in February announced a raise of $450 million, which is absolutely incredible. And rooting for you, kudos on the massive raise. Obviously, there's a lot of initiatives going on at Polygon. The initiative you're running with studios is one of them. As you think about more holistically on Polygon, what are sort of the key buckets that are the key priorities for investment going forward, particularly those that are relevant to, quote unquote, the metaverse?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, that we were excited to raise that money, but, with that comes a great responsibility to make sure that we're doing right by the community and the developers and users. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about how best to deploy that. And we're doing it on a variety of fronts. First and foremost, we have a $100 million ecosystem fund. That fund is very much focused on helping invest in entrepreneurs and founders that are coming up with incredible Web3 ideas. Some of those are touching on more of the complexity of a metaverse and digital world. Some of them are not, but it spans across, the entire NFT space, which is really exciting. And so we get to see a ton of great companies and people come through that are building on Polygon. We have over 7,000 decentralized apps now on Polygon that are built on chain. A lot of those are games as well, like we stated before. The other thing too is we really want to continue to build out our presence. We talked about the rate that Polygon is growing is so fast that we need to make sure that we actually are scaling the people element. We always talk about transactions per second and stability of infrastructure and network, but it's also really important that we scale people. So we'll be making sure that we hire out that team that I've been speaking about and making sure that we bring in the right resources. And then also making sure we strike the right partnerships. It's really important. There's a lot of people are looking. I believe Polygon is going to power the metaverse, if you will. Like a lot of big partners we're speaking with, talking about how they're thinking about their digital strategy and how they're participating in the space and how they want to leverage NFTs. And so it will take a lot of creative execution with some of these partners, bringing them along in the space, making sure that they understand how best to execute in it. And so we want to be strategists in our own right that's helping with that and helping facilitate that. So it's a mix of working with Web3 natives that know it well, and the things that they need are very different. It could be tokenomics, it could be smart contract auditing, it could help them with technical integration. But then there's also a lot of what you would consider the traditional Web2 folks across the industry, and they need a lot of guidance on what is the metaverse, how do you think about NFTs, how do you think about chain selection, kind of like what we were talking about before, and why Polygon. And so I want to be able to come to the table and say, look, Ethereum is, if you're betting on the future of the metaverse and you're betting on Web3 and blockchain, you are betting on Ethereum. And no one is going to scale Ethereum better and help onboard developers into Ethereum than Polygon is going to. And on top of that, we have the best team in the business that's going to help you navigate this space and ensure that not only are you building on Polygon, but you find success on the platform. And so the money goes to basically facilitating all of that and making sure that we continue to be a leader in the space, over the next decade as the metaverse continues to grow.
Well, for the builders and creators who are listening to the episode today, this was a pretty compelling pitch from Ryan. So feel free to reach out to Ryan to get more info.
Come on over. We're ready to work with you all.
So Ryan, after giving this really super clear, succinct overview of really the core value proposition and vision for Polygon, it seems as though crypto gaming and Web3 are at an interesting transition point. We talked about a few minutes ago about the evolution of NFTs specifically, but it seems as though we're seeing a second generation emerging now of crypto games, starting to come over. And as though one of the big differences seems to be making these experiences more addressable to a much wider population. For a lack of a better description, maybe more casual players, casual gamers, quote unquote, I've heard the term and I love it, quote unquote, normies, as opposed to kind of the crypto native, the speculators, et cetera, which are obviously going to be around, but may well not be the dominant audience as Web3 evolve. So for example, building wallets and custody technology for NFTs into games, instead of needing to link your own wallet and have, sort of virus currency to get in. What's your view on how the space is evolving, which is obviously rapidly every day, from a more niche crypto native audience to one that can really be relevant to millions and potentially billions of gamers and internet users globally? And then alongside with this question, what are your thoughts on the financializations of games via mechanics like play to earn? Should we focus on less on earning going forward? Should it be let's play, have fun, have meaning, connect, on the way, trade, make a bit of money? So would love to pick your brain on that and help us unpack what is really happening as we speak.
Yeah, there was a handful of questions inside of that. Let's touch on all of them. I'll start with the last part first. I think the play to earn conversation has dominated, the blockchain gaming conversation or crypto gaming conversation, however you want to kind of phrase it, for a while. Because if you think about it, the games are rudimentary, right? I mean, they're not high fidelity, high sophisticated games. They're not AAA games, and that's fine, right? And I think play to earn serves a certain like lower monetizing geographical markets where there is an opportunity to balance game design and token design and make it worthwhile for players to have the ability and capability to earn from their commitment and time engaging with the game. I think that's happening. Some people are well intended with it and aren't doing it right. Some people are bad actors. Some people are nailing it. It's a variety of mix across the board on play to earn. I think when you have something as free as the internet, like blockchain is, you have a variety of people that are good actors and bad actors and everything in between, taking advantage of the technology. And so you're starting to see a lot of really interesting play to earn games come out that are really nailing it. You're seeing, games like how Axie and crypto unicorns are continuing to evolve, and balance the space out and figure it out. I mean, you have to give kudos to a lot of these games because there's no playbook to follow. There's no blueprint to follow. They're kind of the first ones through the wall are always the bloodiest, if you will, and they're figuring it out. And that's why I think information sharing on token design and balancing those economies, particularly within play to earn, is really important. But you're also starting, so I think that's what that is. But you really should take a step back out and not just associate that crypto gaming is play to earn. Play to earn is a subsection of crypto gaming. There are going to be multiple facets of how people leverage underlying chain technology in their games. A really easy one that people don't talk about enough is just marketplaces. I mean, there are really interesting games that are going to be coming out in the near future that are off-chain, on-chain games, right? So you never have to set up a wallet. You can immediately start to play. And then when you want to participate in the marketplace, it is a whole other element, and you do need to have a wallet, and that is an on-chain experience, right? So it's like a really cool MMORPG and something like that, right? And so you started, the first part of your question was just onboard ramps in general, right? Dude, crypto wallets like MetaMask, come on. These are not intuitive experiences. They haven't really gotten materially better. They're gonna need to improve, and this is why I think everybody's gonna need to contribute across the space. You're gonna see a couple things happen. Like, yes, MetaMask has a long way to go and is a massive barrier to entry for a large majority of population, right? For a variety of reasons. But you are gonna start to see UX, UI get better and more intuitive. And people are going to start to get more educated as well, right? So if you think about even like going back to dial-up internet and people think, what, you're dialing up the internet? It's like cable internet, to just being able to understand how to operate it more intuitively, like that will happen. And so these things will collide. You'll hit an inflection point, and onboarding and wallets will be much more seamless. In the meantime, there are a lot of great companies that are doing, let's say, Web 2.5 versions of Web 3, setting up a wallet in the background, still letting you use a credit card to purchase an NFT, right? I think these are going to be the great things, and these are the on-ramps people are used to. But it's funny, with gaming, these are the most natural on-ramps already, right? Like, let's just take my favorite game is Valorant, right? Or even take a League of Legends, which is bigger. You're coming in, you're buying Riot points. Riot points you're using to buy digital skins that are cosmetic items. And what, you can't sell them. Riot points don't do shit for you other than buy an item. And all of a sudden now I'm saying, okay, Riot points is now a token. You get in early. You now have value in the company. Like, you actually have value in the actual company now and your participation in it. Those tokens could have governance rights and how we develop things. Those cosmetics, now you have liquidity in market. Who's owned them, right? And now even if you participate in, say, season 1 of buying some of those skins and the scarcity of them over time, you've actually seen the value. And so I played a game and I earned money from it, but it's not play to earn the way people are speaking about it, right? You actually had a way to invest in a company and a thing that you care deeply about that you could never do today, right? So anyway, I think there's a lot to unpack there. You're going to see the evolution of gaming that's far beyond just play to earn. The conversation will get much bigger around on-chain gaming than just that subsection of it. And 2, you're going to see on-ramps get a lot easier. And 3, you're going to see people start to get much more savvy from a technical standpoint on how they operate their digital wallets.
Thank you for saying it. I want to say thank you for the following reason, because I felt like I'm being kind of a bit delusional when I tweeted one day that in the grand scheme of things, we're going to look back at play to earn and realize that it was a great use case. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're talking about a global access and opportunities for users on this new internet, play to earn is going to be a very small subset of a much, much bigger activity, just because of the fact that not everything in life is about making money, trading money, making money, trading money. And so, I think very much echoing what you just explained to us.
And that'll be more of a testament to how big I think the space will get, less about play to earn, but more about that. I agree with what you just said, but I think that it really is about the size and scale of it. Too many people, a big issue I had last year when I was kind of observing more from the sidelines, running gaming at YouTube and investing and stuff, was just, you had a lot of crypto native folks speaking to gamers. And it was kind of like, oh, everything, we're just gonna crypto's gonna just, take over the entire gaming industry. Like, get on board or you don't get it. And it's like, of course, people are like, get the, out of here, right? I'm sorry, that's not how it's gonna happen. And so now you're starting to see much more measured approach, much more measured dialogue, much more reasonable. And then people that also intuitively understand gaming and might not have I don't have the crypto depth of somebody that's a crypto native that has been in this space, for all of these years. But we're starting to find people find that middle ground between the two and then say, okay, this is actually how we're going to tackle this subsection of the industry. This is actually how we're driving value. And then a lot of it makes much more sense in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's I think we've all probably seen stuff out there in this space where you can just tell from the surface that this was a project created by crypto natives, quote unquote, crypto bros. And then they're like, oh, how do we actually make this work? Oh, gaming's a big market. Now we can do crypto gaming, and then we'll shill it over there. There is stuff out there like that, and we don't have to call any out, but we've all seen it. And, as we move away from that, that's why I don't like the term GameFi, because that underscores the financialization of gaming.
Agreed.
And I think that no matter what the methodology and mechanism that it's been in gaming, anytime we try to over financialize it, loot boxes, NFTs are being pushed back now to some degree. We've seen that with Ubisoft and others, right? Anytime we try to over financialize gaming, it instantly does not work. And so we need to create ways that have financial incentives, but the focus needs to be on gaming first, because I always like to say gamers are fickle and we can't lose them.
Yep. I think a lot of the thing too is some of the things that you've seen wrong are people try to take a game that was never meant to be an on-chain game and then attach an element to it, and that's also highly disruptive and not really the way it should be done. You really almost want to say, you're building kind of a new puzzle and you have these new pieces, right? And so because you have it, you can think about it from the ground up very differently. You will think about it differently. You'll think from a development standpoint, oh, okay, actually getting community to weigh in on something through voting, through token process and governance process starts to wire your brain differently in the way that you think about development. So I think it's really important that people do think about how they build these things from the ground up. And so they are, right? And I think inherently people are doing that. And then what you see then first is the quick to market game, play to earn kind of, financialization first, because it's the easiest to get out of market right now because it's a low fidelity, easy game to deploy versus this massive MMO or something where you're like, damn, you could do a lot of cool stuff on chain that way if you did, from the ground up. And so it's a function of time. And I think the thing that gets me excited is I see the type of talent leaving the Riots, the Activisions, the Blizzards, the EAs of the world, coming into Web3, getting funded by the Andreessens, the Lightspeeds, the Sequoias of the world. And you're like, this is dope. Oh, 2025. Okay, we're going to, it's going to be a minute, right? Or whatever, right? So in due time, patience is a virtue. I also think this whole space will take a little bit more time to materialize. I think longer than maybe some people think. I made the jump because of what the next 10 years look like for me, not what the next 18 months do.
Yeah, for sure. It's a marathon, not a sprint, to get to where we all want to get with the metaverse and Web3. I do want to shift gears. I want to ask about, something that I think is a relatively big initiative at Polygon. One of my my friends out there who's actually like a crypto game developer said that this is probably the biggest thing that a lot of people aren't talking about in crypto gaming is Polygon ID and kind of, bringing real world identification into this space to, weed out bots and things like that. I know it's a big initiative overall at Polygon, but, maybe if you could just kind of give us an overview of what this is and then why privacy is just so important to the development of this space.
Yeah, there's a lot there, right? Like I think, there is a decent amount of regulatory roadblocks with, know your customer, KYC, right? And then, the third party KYC demands, are highly sensitive and personal information, to your point, right? It's in the hands of other people, right? And it just represents a lot of security risks. And so last year, Polygon spent about $1 billion on a variety of ZK companies, Zero and Hermes, and we've been really focused on what does ZK proofs and ZK in general be able to do to the space overall. And so this allows people to basically utilize mathematics to verify information without having to reveal what that information is. And so we think it's like, this is going to be a unique offering that Polygon has. We think it's going to be really material in how people integrate and scale, and actually stay regulatory compliant, stay anonymous, stay secure, respect privacy, and actually scale. These are all really important things, and we think Polygon ID is going to largely solve for all of this. We think it's an important part of Web3. So I'm glad to hear that your friend said that.
Yeah, and I think alongside with privacy comes the discussion of security. They are different, but they go together in a lot of people's minds. We've recently seen what's happened at Sky Mavis with Axie, and I know that's a different technology with them using a bridge to Ronin as opposed to, being a layer 2 solution on top of an existing chain. But, maybe if you can just kind of give a sense of security at Polygon and kind of, how you think about what happened over there and what you guys do to protect the ecosystem that you're building.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, but just heart goes out to the Sky Mavis, Ronin, and the Axie team. I mean, friends over there, they're good people. Super unfortunate for all the people that are involved and users, the community. I mean, it is absolutely an unfortunate growing pain that comes with the industry and some of the technologies that are out there. We have done one, talking about kind of what happened with Ronin is they were able to access the multi-sig keys for the validator consensus, which basically all happened because that was all stored on servers that were connected to the internet. So one, all our multi-sigs are offline, right? So you can't get to them, they're not online. So it really eliminates that. The vector of attack that happened to Ronin is impossible to happen, like literally impossible for Polygon, because it's just the multi-sigs aren't online. The other thing is we are, I think it's 10 times the amount of validators that Ronin had as well. So you would need to control 66% of them. So anyway, this is just from a technical perspective. You always want to be very mindful and respectful of privacy. So you never want to approach it with any level of arrogance, and so we take it very serious. But the way that happened to Ronin could not happen to Polygon in that abuse vector. Look, a lot of big companies are going to trust Polygon's infrastructure, right? They're going to build on Polygon. They're going to partner with us. There is a whole host of things that come with that. It's the responsibility of the users. It's making sure that we maintain uptime and can provide stability, that we can fulfill our promises of what transactions per seconds that we can do, that we can actually continue to scale our infrastructure out. That we believe that there's going to be a lot of different solutions to building on chain. And so we have things like our POS. We have the ability to do subnets or sovereign chains for those that want to operate, their own validators and set up their own, native chain through Polygon's tech, right? So we really think of all of these things very thoughtfully. We spend, question that you asked earlier about capital deployment. We've spent a lot of money on privacy, on security, on acquiring companies that are going to allow us to meaningfully scale. So I think all of this is every day quite literally every day we're talking about stuff like this. It's an unfortunate growing pain of the industry, and we just need to be vigilant to make sure that nothing like that ever happens to the users or developers on Polygon.
So, Ryan, one thing that we have been really focused on in the sort of convergence of creator economy with the metaverse, we think that, alongside blockchain and the metaverse, one other massive trend that is been going on for quite a while, and being at YouTube for so long, leading gaming at YouTube, you have seen it very, very closely. Also, being a streamer yourself. And so talking about the convergence of creator economy and the metaverse, our prior guest, Rev, who runs simulation and Omniverse at NVIDIA, said that the metaverse really is, in a way, the democratization of real-time 3D development.
Yeah.
And so in your time at YouTube, you clearly were at the forefront of democratizing video creation and enabling a whole new generation of creators in this new format. How do you see your experience at YouTube and more broadly being part of the emergence of the creator economy over the last 5 to 10 years, facilitating the growth of the metaverse and sort of that democratization of building, 3D real-time virtual experiences?
Yeah, if you think about like what, at my time at YouTube and like what we did at YouTube is actually, it was a very simple concept that you just, you need to provide a strong infrastructure and stable infrastructure for people to actually create content on, right? So uploading a video, processing that video, finding that video, all really important, right? Reducing the cost. If you can believe it or not, it was like very costly and cost people actually back in the day upload videos, right? So you take this off and all of a sudden now I've reduced the friction for people to create. And so you've now allowed for it. And you get very basic stuff. You get cat videos, you get home videos, you get nonsense, but stuff people are finding interesting and you're using it to host and you're using it to discover content. How do you actually then get better content out of that is then you start to monetize it, right? And you start to think of like, how do I actually create value to creators and make sure that you give them money and that they're incentivized to focus more on this, to pivot into it full time, and right? And so you become super obsessed with monetization, improving CPMs, improving ad inventory, thinking of alternative monetization products to get them started earlier. This is all fundamentally the same of what you're going to do in Web3. Polygon, got to make sure that, apps are really discoverable, really got to make sure infrastructure is stable, really got to make sure that you're incentivizing developers to come build on your platform, right? And invest in you. It is all the exact same playbook. Now you might deploy it a little bit different in a creator economy versus a developer ecosystem. There's definitely nuances there that are different, but the spirit of it is the same. And so I actually think, and I learned a ton, dealing with bad actors and and how you think through that and how you actually acknowledge that, where you want to be this democratic platform that democratizes content and has freedom of speech and all of these different things, but you want to protect users and you want to protect privacy, right? You balance all of these things. And so I'm excited to carry all of these learnings over to Polygon, because I think there's frightening similarities between the two that will come in handy. And certainly was no shortage of mistakes that I'm sure I made and did make over the years that I learned from, and I'm excited to kind of think through it from a Web3 playbook. And then for me personally, you couldn't ask for all of my worlds to converge in a more enthusiastic way. It's like crypto, creator economy, video games, put it in the middle. It's this like melting pot of like metaverse and Web3 and on-chain and video games and all of these things. So I just feel very fortunate to be here working in it and be a part of the industry.
I think that's awesome. And I think that's a great place to wrap it up. We're at this intersection of all these amazing technology trends, this melting pot that's converging into the metaverse, and it's really exciting. And as you said, it is a long haul, but I think we're going to get there. And it's when we get there, we're going to look back just like every technology trend. And, we tend to overestimate things in the short run and underestimate them in the long run. And I think a decade from now, we're going to look back and say, look at what this became. I mean, who would have thunk Instagram existed today 15 years ago, right? But here we are. And so I think this is a massive turning point, inflection point for technology, and it's really exciting. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us on this great episode of Into the Metaverse.
Yes, we'll come back in 10 years and we'll do our decade post-mortem, and we'll have much more gray hair then. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Always happy to chat. Love what you're all doing. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.